how ENTJs see the 16 personalities. ESTPs. ENTJs view ESTPs as impulsive tacticians with a zest for life. Despite certain similarities, these two types diverge in their approach, with ESTPs being more tactical and immediate in their decision-making. ESTPs, with their ability to react instantly to their environment and their spontaneous, adventurous nature, are seen by ENTJs as valuable associates in the quest for achieving goals. They value the ESTP's ability to keep a pulse on the present, to maximize opportunities as they arise, even if the ESTP's risk-taking nature can be seen as somewhat impulsive by the more strategically minded ENTJs. They see the ESTP as a great partner for real-world execution, where quick thinking and flexibility is paramount. I think that ENTJs respect the raw energy of ESTPs and admire their fighting spirit. I have heard anecdotally from ENTJs that when younger, their SE is used very indulgently and even recklessly, leading to them mistyping themselves as ESTPs. Both are big personalities who are very forceful. They have that shared approach of wanting to attack life. There is definitely a certain kinship between them. ISTPs. ENTJs see ISTPs as cool-headed, problem-solving executors. In the eyes of an ENTJ, ISTPs are enigmatic, thinky, doey hybrids who are capable of dissecting issues with a refined, logical analysis. They admire their TI-DOM ability to explore a problem from all angles and come up with the most efficient and often elegant solution. In fact, both TE and TI seek efficiency, just in slightly different ways. TI wants to crystallize understanding efficiently, such as in formulas and principles, whereas TE wants to systematize efficiently. ISTPs, with their introverted nature, might be perceived by ENTJs as a bit solitary, but that same trait also affords them the ability to focus and delve deeply into their interests and pursuits. In the fast-paced world of an ENTJ, ISTPs remind them of the power of focused, precise thought and masterfully timed action. ENFJs. ENTJs see ENFJs as leaders who can actually be liked by their followers. When describing certain types, I often make the distinction between charm and charisma. Charm is being likable and can run the risk of not having much of an edge. Charisma is about being captivating, but runs the risk of being divisive and off-putting in some ways. ENFJs are charming. ENTJs are charismatic. I see these two types as being on different paths to the same eventual destination. They are both, in some sense, movers of people. They often have different motivations and reasons for doing it, but that is the role they often find themselves in, even when they aren't looking for it. ENTJs can be a little on the tyrannical side. They understand leverage and negotiation and can get people to do what they want via these. ENFJs, by comparison, have more finesse and social subtlety. If an ENTJ had a company and employed the ENFJ, they would delegate them the role of somehow get these humans to like what I'm telling them to do. If you've seen the show Billions, Bobby Axelrod and Wendy Rhodes would represent this dynamic very well. INFJs. ENTJs see INFJs as deeply insightful about human nature, but not always effective in their approach. ENTJs are the so-called supervisor type of the INFJ. They see them as gifted and able when it comes to understanding not just people, but things far beyond that too. However, ENTJs are TE machines, whereas INFJs struggle most with that function. It's their blind spot. Consequently, the INFJ will typically feel like the ENTJ is rushing them, pushing them to be more organized and efficient, and just generally harassing them over a weak spot. The ENTJ, though, will simply feel like they're trying to help the INFJ. ENTJs also have NI, the dominant function of the INFJ, as their second slot function, so they wield it strongly. Because of that, ENTJs won't be as blown away by the mysteriously insightful nature of the INFJ, since they have access to many of the same powers. ENTPs. ENTJs see ENTPs as useful frenemies. They see the intellectual agility of ENTPs, their proclivity for thinking, that has long forgotten where or what the box even is, as a valuable asset when it comes to innovative strategies and overcoming obstacles. ENTPs are great roadblock reducers, after all. ENTJs are great with NE, the dominant function of the ENTP, and ENTPs are great with TE, the dominant function of ENTJs. However, neither of them value those functions very much, so they're evenly matched, but with different priorities. They clash because ENTJs often like being in charge, in control, and dictating the direction, and ENTPs, well, like to screw with people who want to be in charge. INTP. ENTJs see INTPs as the embodiment of their own pure academic and intellectual side. INTPs are the shadow type of the ENTJ. This means that they have the same kinds of functions, thinking, intuitive, sensing, and feeling, in the same order, but flipped in terms of whether they are introverted or extroverted. ENTJs are not always the stereotypical, larger-than-life characters. Sometimes they are insular, introspective, withdrawn even, and in their own worlds. Many of those ENTJs can mistype as INTJs. Many of these ENTJs are social introverts. I think they look upon INTPs as being purists of the mind, often content with knowing, deeply knowing, without that same compulsion to mold the world with knowledge that ENTJs have. So ENTJs see INTPs, in some ways, as an alternative version of what they might be. ISFJ. ENTJs see ISFJs as inefficiently and overly nicely admirable. This one is a curious combination, where the dominant function of each type is the blind spot of the other. If you know any ISFJs, you'll realize that they aren't really inefficient, at least not compared to most other types. But they do have TE as a blind spot, which is the dominant function of the ENTJ. So ENTJs will look at them and wonder why they aren't more quickly updating their methods and processes to be in line with the most effective and speedy ways of getting things done. However, ISFJs succeed in a way that ENTJs often fail to. ISFJs have SI as a dominant function, which is the ENTJ blind spot. You will rarely hear of an ISFJ burning themselves out. They are masters of pacing. An ENTJ might move beyond them at lightning speed, but in their unrelenting push, overextend themselves and become depleted for a time. ISFJs almost never make this mistake. So ENTJs will very much appreciate the ISFJ brand of grit and long-term, sustainable work ethic. ESFJ. ENTJs see ESFJs as attainers of equilibrium in life. To an ENTJ, the ESFJ appears to have found the secret formula for a balanced life. The ESFJ's ease in juggling a multitude of roles and responsibilities while still making time for leisure and relationships is a sight to behold. ENTJs, despite the formidable success they can bring about in their lives, are usually not balanced people, at least not without a lot of effort. They are intense and extreme. The most cliched example would be a lack of work-life balance. They are sometimes guilty of being all business, even in their personal relationships at times. ESFJs are a type who manage to maintain relationships expertly, even when embracing all other aspects of their life. ENTJs admire this and would like to emulate it. There is certainly a clash when it comes to how blunt and abrasive ENTJs can be, and the annoyance they sometimes feel about the overly agreeable ESFJ nature, but there is definitely respect there too. ISFP. ENTJs see ISFPs as the freedom fighters to their tyrannical dictatorships. If ENTJs are the emperors, then ISFPs are the lone figures challenging them. Not to take their throne, not for the sake of their own personal advancement and power, but just out of principle. Like any opposing types, they are two sides of the same coin. Any clash has a corresponding complementarity. Relationships between them can diverge similarly between those two paths. I've talked before about the archetypical ISFP in fiction, on a one-person versus the world, vengeful crusade. A character that marries these two concepts is Maximus, the main character from Gladiator. He was in line to rule but was betrayed, and experiences that role of outsider and outcast. Instead of ruling via that position of authority and status that he'd worked his way up to, he leads by example on the ground level, and rises up one battle and one fight at a time. It's just my weird way of looking at things, but I've always viewed him as an ENTJ in ISFP mode. ESTJ. ENTJs see ESTJs as more consistently effective versions of them. Yes, you heard that right. They consider ESTJs to be better at getting things done. It is important to bear in mind that ENTJs are still intuitive types. They won't always be paragons of practicality and pragmatism. ENTJs are capable of being very in their heads, whereas ESTJs are unequivocally down-to-earth people. So they're a rare example, possibly the only example, where an ENTJ might feel kind of impractical by comparison to them. Assuming there isn't a clash of egos between them, these two types can work well together. It often makes sense for the ENTJ to be directing the overall strategy. ESTJs have a blind spot when it comes to seeing the bigger picture and how things connect together in a more overarching way. Having someone with that vision lay things out means they can be fully unleashed. ENTJs. ENTJs see themselves as unstoppable forces who sometimes forget to slow down. The thing about life is that there's always another goal, another battle, another scalable summit. This is, to a type like an ENTJ, quite ideal. But in that pathological pursuit of achieving things, much can be missed and overlooked. There is so much to savor by simply stopping, by standing or sitting still for a while and just taking it all in. Even smelling the roses doesn't really give them their full due. ENTJs are life's orchestrators. Without their drive and high standards, many things would fall apart. But ENTJs are people who don't have an off switch. Sometimes this makes them forget that they do have a pause button though, and should make use of it more. INTJs. ENTJs see INTJs as them behind the curtain. ENTJs are happy in the spotlight, happy leading the charge. This affords them many desirable things, but they pay a price for it too. You're out in the open, you're visible, at times exposed to rivals, enemies, and people who'd like to see you fail. ENTJs are conspicuous people. INTJs are the types of people who could be running a criminal empire from their bedroom and no one would be any the wiser. Their shadowy nature allows them to go deeper with their plans, to keep their cards close to their chest. Because of this, their plans and schemes can be more far-reaching and more likely to be effective. In a way, INTJs are like ENTJs that no one is paying attention to. ENTJs both respect and envy this quality of theirs. ENTJs will also see INTJs as being more emotional, not in the irrational sense, although you could make that case by comparison, but in terms of overt passion and that burning emotional intensity that drives them. INTJs are people who really care, and they have no problem being upfront about this. ENTJs can struggle more to even know their values and passions. ESFPs. ENTJs see ESFPs as them when they are totally unbridled. These two types can often be mistaken for each other. People might also mistype between them for that same reason. They have the same functions in a slightly different order. An ENTJ who is SE heavy, so to speak, is going to appear like an ESFP, and an ESFP who is TE heavy is going to appear like an ENTJ. When ENTJs dip into their lower functions, they can summon up this side of them. In fact, this side of them is something of a secret weapon. If they need to power through something, to unleash the chaos beast, or just simply roll with the punches of life, it's ESFP mode they enter. In some ways, ENTJs see ESFPs as them in play mode. Them when they are seeking respite and just fun. They see ESFPs as a kind of pure energy, people who are in touch with the source of life, and people they like to emulate and spend time with. ENFPs. ENTJs see ENFPs as hurricanes of human potential. They see them as whirlwinds of ideas, emotions, and potential, somehow able to find unexplored territories in even the most well-trodden subjects. ENTJs look at ENFPs as people who are leaving so much upside on the table. Their ceiling is massive, yet in their chaos, their possible achievements remain unrealized, or less realized than the ENTJ would like. ENFPs, especially when mature, can actually resemble ESTJs. If these two types meet, when the ENFP is in that mode, there's a brilliant synergy. Most of the time though, ENTJs will marvel at the effortless brilliance of the ENFP, but lament the results, or lack thereof, that they get when they actually put effort into something. ISTJs. ENTJs see ISTJs as suffering the drawbacks and gaining the advantages of lacking flashiness. Let me compare two examples of these types, Julius Caesar and Augustus. ENTJ and ISTJ, respectively. Both of them were great rulers. Well, great by the ethically dubious standards of the time. But Julius Caesar was a charismatic, flashy, and unignorable presence. He innovated in many ways, was a change agent, and threw the rulebook out the window. This made him impressive, but, among other traits, gained him enemies as well. He could be mercurial and temperamental. Augustus, by comparison, was described as a man of moderation, restraint, and an inexhaustible, almost inhuman patience. ENTJs find the patience and restraint of ISTJs impressive. They see both virtues as indicative of a certain kind of mental toughness. These are very different personality types for sure, but they do have a fundamental desire in common. Productivity, work ethic, efficiency, and effectiveness. Getting things done, and getting them done well. However, like the ISFJs, ISTJs are able to maintain that consistent and relentless approach. They have a motor that ticks over quietly and unceasingly. ISTJs are just as much masters of TE as ENTJs are, but they are even more powerful with SI, which is the ENTJ blind spot. ENTJs can burn too bright at times. That light can draw many malicious moths. ENTJs admire the slow-burning simmer that ISTJs are characterized by, and can learn from their more steady approach to getting the job done. INFPs. ENTJs see INFPs as meandering seekers of a worthwhile goal. The goal is knowing yourself. I've made this distinction many times, but I'll say it again here. There are people in life who are able to achieve pretty much anything they want, but don't know what they truly want. Then there are people who know exactly who they are and what matters to them, but don't know how to easily reconcile that with how reality is. ENTJs see INFPs as people in the latter category. INFPs are people who lack forcefulness lots of the time. This is something that will bother ENTJs, who will often urge them to go after what they want more and push against life harder. There is a beautiful archetypical contrast between them. ENTJs show the brilliance of following the most efficient route, i.e. the straight line between 2 points, and INFPs show the wisdom of the detour, or even the virtue in sometimes getting lost. ENTJs appreciate this about them. If you are any of these 16 types, or someone who doesn't know the type, then subscribe. It makes a big difference to the video and the channel overall, and also my, ego.